How do you live in a world where you're being lied to about money every single day? You notice your grocery bill has doubled in 3 years. You know your paycheck, even with raises, buys less than it used to. You watch your retirement savings evaporate in real terms while officials tell you the economy is strong, inflation is moderating, and everything's fine. But you're not crazy. You're being gaslit. When they told you inflation was transitory, you believed them. When they blamed Putin, you wondered. When they blamed corporate greed, something didn't add up. Because you remember these same corporations existing 5 years ago when prices were reasonable. You remember these same geopolitical tensions. So what actually changed? Here's what nobody in power wants you to understand. Milton Friedman explained exactly what's happening to you 50 years ago. He predicted it. He warned about it. He showed you how to see through it. And the methodology he used, the way he thought about economics, is something you can learn in one sitting. Not the math, not the formulas, not the academic papers. The framework, the questions, the clarity. You know that feeling when someone finally explains something you've sensed but couldn't articulate? That moment when scattered confusion suddenly organizes into crystal clear understanding? That's what Friedman does for economics. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll watch a politician promise to fight inflation by spending more money, and you'll immediately recognize a contradiction. You'll hear about rent control helping the poor, and you'll know, before checking any data, it will do the opposite. You'll see minimum wage increases proposed, and you'll predict exactly who gets hurt. Not because you became an economist, because you learned to think like Friedman thought. The confusion you feel about economic news, it's not you. They're deliberately obscuring basic cause and effect because transparency will expose what they're doing. Friedman's entire career was ripping away that obscurity and showing you the mechanisms underneath. And here's the beautiful part. His methodology is shockingly simple. Not simplistic, simple, clear, empirical, testable, applicable to every economic claim you'll ever hear. You're not alone in this confusion. Millions of Americans feel economically gaslit right now, told that what they're experiencing isn't real, that experts know better, that the numbers don't mean what common sense says they mean. But your instinct that something's wrong, it's correct. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to teach you how Milton Friedman approached economics, not as a student memorizing theories, but as a citizen demanding clarity. You'll learn the specific questions he asked, the patterns he trained himself to see, and the empirical tests he applied to every economic claim. By the end, you won't just understand Friedman's ideas. You'll be able to apply his methodology yourself, to current events, to policy debates, to protecting your family's financial future. If you want to stop being confused about economics and start seeing clearly, subscribe to this channel, where we explore the thinking of minds like Friedman who refuse to let complexity obscure truth. Let me tell you something that will change how you see every economic debate. Milton Friedman wasn't primarily interested in being right. He was interested in being empirical. That distinction is everything. Most economists, and certainly most politicians, start with what they want to be true, then find arguments supporting it. Friedman did the opposite. He started with a question: what actually happens when we do this policy? Then he looked at the evidence. All of it, especially the evidence that contradicted his assumptions. This is the first principle you need to absorb. Friedman taught economics by asking compared to what and what are the actual results. Think about how radical that is. When someone proposes rent control, the natural human response is, well, high rent is terrible, so controlling it must help. That's intention-based thinking. Friedman's question was different. Okay, show me cities that implemented rent control. What happened to available housing? What happened to housing quality? What happened to the poorest renters? Did they get apartments or did connected people get them? He didn't ask, is this well-intentioned? He asked, does this work? You know how refreshing that is in today's discourse? When every debate is about who cares more, who's more compassionate, who has pure motives. Friedman just wanted to know, does the policy achieve its stated goal, Or does it do the opposite? Let me show you this methodology in action with something you're living through right now. Inflation. The official narrative changes constantly. First, it was transitory, then Putin's invasion, then corporate greed. Then inflation is actually good because wages are rising too. The story keeps shifting, and you're supposed to just accept whatever explanation they're currently offering. Friedman's approach would be, ignore all the narratives. Let's look at what inflation actually is and what causes it. And here's what he discovered through decades of research across multiple countries and time periods. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. That's not a political statement. That's an empirical observation. When government prints more money than the economy produces goods and services, prices rise. Every single time, not sometimes. Not it's complicated. Always. So when you hear about inflation, Friedman taught you to ask one question. What happened to the money supply? If government massively expanded money supply in 2020 to 2021, it did. You predict inflation in 2022 to 2023. We got it. The narrative doesn't matter. Putin doesn't matter. Corporate greed doesn't matter. The money supply tells you what's coming. That's the Friedman methodology. Identify the actual mechanism causing the outcome, then test it against evidence. Notice what this does for you as a citizen. You're no longer dependent on experts telling you what to think. You can look at money supply data yourself. It's public. You can see the pattern. You understand the cause and effect. Nobody can gaslight you because you're looking at the mechanism, not listening to the story. This is what I mean by learning to think like Friedman. You develop a healthy skepticism of narratives and a relentless focus on what actually happens when we do X. And here's the key. This methodology works because economics isn't about opinions or values or political preferences. It's about human behavior responding to incentives in predictable ways. Friedman understood that people, all people, regardless of culture or time period, respond to costs and benefits. That's not cynicism. That's realism. If you make something more expensive, people use less of it. If you subsidize something, people consume more of it. If you remove consequences, people take more risks. These aren't conservative or liberal principles. They're human nature. Friedman just insisted we acknowledge human nature when designing policy, rather than pretending people will suddenly behave differently because government wants them to. So here's your first lesson in Friedman's framework. Always ask, what does this policy incentivize people to actually do, not what does this policy hope people will do. That one question will clarify 90% of economic debates you encounter. Now that you understand Friedman's empirical foundation, let me give you the specific questions he used to cut through economic nonsense. These are your tools, your BS detector. The questions that reveal whether a policy will actually work or just sound good. Question 1. Compare to what? This is Friedman's most devastating question because it forces comparison to reality, not utopia. Someone says, we need government to provide healthcare so everyone has access. Friedman asks, compare to what? How does healthcare work in countries with government systems versus market systems? What are wait times, quality of care, innovation rates, cost as percentage of GDP? You're not being heartless by asking these questions. You're being empirical about what actually helps people. Watch how this works with minimum wage. The proposal sounds compassionate. Let's require businesses to pay workers at least $15 per hour so they can afford to live. Friedman's response, compare to what? What happens to employment rates for low-skilled workers when you raise minimum wage? Show me the data from cities that did this. How many teenagers got hired? How many small businesses automated instead? How many entry-level positions disappeared? The evidence is clear. Minimum wage laws price low-skilled workers out of jobs. That's not a theory. That's what happens. But you only see it if you ask compared to what actual outcomes, instead of compared to what we wish would happen. You can apply this immediately. Next time you hear an economic proposal, ask, Where has this been tried? What were the results? Not the intentions, the results. Question 2. What are the incentives? Friedman understood that incentives predict behavior more reliably than intentions. Example, welfare programs. The stated intention is helping people in poverty. Noble goal. But Friedman asked, what does this program incentivize? If you lose benefits when you get a job, what are you incentivized to do? Stay unemployed. If you lose benefits when you get married, what are you incentivized to do? Stay single. If benefits increase with each child while you're unmarried, what are you incentivized to do? Friedman wasn't being cruel. He was predicting outcomes based on incentive structures. And he was right. Welfare dependency became generational precisely because the programs incentivized dependency rather than independence. This is your second tool. Always ask what behavior does this policy reward and punish. The behavior you subsidize, you get more of. The behavior you tax or penalize, you get less of. That principle works for everything. You want to know what happens when government subsidizes college loans? Ask what it incentivizes. It incentivizes universities to raise tuition because students can borrow unlimited amounts. So why wouldn't prices rise? And exactly that happened. Tuition skyrocketed in direct correlation to government loan expansion. Friedman predicted it, not because he was psychic, because he understood incentives. Question 3. Who actually benefits? This is where Friedman got really devastating, because he showed that policies hurt the very people they're supposed to help. Rent control is supposedly for the poor, but who actually benefits? People who already have rent-controlled apartments. Typically middle-class folks who got there first. Who gets hurt? Poor people trying to find apartments, because landlords have no incentive to build new rental housing or maintain existing units. Occupational licensing is supposedly for consumer protection, but who actually benefits? Existing practitioners who face less competition. Who gets hurt? Poor people trying to enter professions without expensive education, and consumers who pay higher prices. Agricultural subsidies are supposedly for struggling family farms. But who actually benefits? Massive corporate farms that get most of the money. Who gets hurt? Taxpayers who fund it, and poor countries whose farmers can't compete with subsidized American products. See the pattern? Friedman taught you to follow the money and see who actually benefits, not who theoretically benefits. If this clarity is valuable to you, if you're seeing economic debates differently already, hit that like button so more people discover this framework for cutting through propaganda. Your third tool, always ask who has the incentive to support this policy and why. Follow the money to actual beneficiaries, not claim beneficiaries. These 3 questions compare to what are the incentives, who actually benefits. They're your foundation. Now let's build on them. Here's where Friedman separated himself from every economist who just had opinions. He demanded evidence, real evidence, not anecdotes, not studies show, not cherry-picked examples. Comprehensive, replicable, verifiable evidence. And he taught you to demand the same thing. Let me show you how this works, because it's going to protect you from so much manipulation. When someone makes an economic claim, taxing the rich will reduce inequality, or trade protection save jobs, or government spending stimulates the economy, Friedman's approach was systematic. Step 1, look for natural experiments. Natural experiments are situations where different policies were tried in similar circumstances, letting you compare outcomes. Example, East and West Germany. Same people, same culture, same starting point after World War II. One chose socialism, one chose capitalism. Friedman said, just look at the results. By 1989, West Germany was prosperous. East Germans were risking death to escape. That's not theory. That's a 40-year controlled experiment. You can find natural experiments everywhere. States that raised minimum wage versus states that didn't. Countries with school choice versus government monopoly. Cities that defunded police versus cities that didn't. The data is there. Friedman taught you to look at it rather than listen to arguments. Step 2. Check if predictions came true. Friedman made specific, testable predictions. That's how science works. You say if my theory is correct, X will happen. Then you check. In the 1960s, Friedman predicted that Keynesian policies would cause stagflation, simultaneous high inflation, and high unemployment, which Keynesian theory said was impossible. The 1970s proved him right. Stagflation happened exactly as he predicted. He predicted welfare programs would increase poverty rather than decrease it by creating dependency. The data proved him right. Poverty rates stopped declining after war on poverty programs expanded. He predicted government education monopoly would fail students while costs skyrocketed. Look at test scores versus spending over 50 years. He was right. This is your tool. Ask, what did this theory predict would happen? Did it happen? If a theory's predictions consistently fail, stop believing that theory. Sounds obvious, right? But watch how often people defend failed theories. Well, we just didn't spend enough, or the implementation was wrong, or that wasn't real socialism. Friedman had no patience for that. If your theory keeps predicting the wrong outcomes, your theory is wrong. Step 3. Look at long-term consequences, not short-term appearances. This is crucial. Bad policies often look good initially, while good policies may be painful at first. Example, when government prints money, it feels stimulative immediately. People have more cash. Spending increases. Economy seems to boom. Friedman taught you to wait. The inflation comes later. The devaluation of savings comes later. The distortion of price signals comes later. Short-term sugar high, long-term diabetes. Contrast this with spending cuts or ending subsidies. Initially painful. Unemployment might tick up. Special interests scream. But long-term, economy reallocates resources more efficiently. Sustainable growth emerges. Health returns. Your 5th tool, always ask what happens in year 5, not just year 1. Bad policies often trade short-term benefits for long-term disaster. Let me make this practical for you. You're watching news right now about some economic policy, student loan forgiveness, industrial subsidies, price controls, whatever. Here's how you apply Friedman's evidence test. First, ask, has this been tried before? Where? What happened? Look it up. The data exists. Second, ask, what are proponents predicting will happen? Are they making testable claims? Or vague promises? Pin them down to specific predictions. Third, ask, what happens in 5 years with this policy? Play it forward. What are the incentives? How do people adjust? What are the second-order effects? And here's what you'll discover. Friedman predictions hold up incredibly well. Free market policies produce prosperity wherever tried. Government interventions produce distortions wherever implemented. Not because of ideology, because of evidence. You know what's powerful about this? You stop being vulnerable to emotional manipulation. When someone says, how can you oppose helping the poor? You respond, I don't oppose helping the poor. I oppose policies that make them worse off. Show me the evidence your policy works. That's thinking like Friedman. That's demanding reality over intention. Now, we need to talk about something deeper, because Friedman didn't just teach economics. He showed you why economic freedom matters for human dignity. This is where his thinking becomes truly transformative. You probably noticed something odd. The same people who want government controlling the economy often want government controlling speech, religion, association. And the same people who want economic freedom tend to want other freedoms too. Friedman explained why this isn't coincidence. It's necessity. Here's the insight. Economic power and political power are connected. When government controls economic decisions, it controls everything else too. Think about this carefully. If government decides where you work, what you earn, what you can buy, where you live, which is what socialist economies do, what freedom do you actually have? If you can't feed your family without government permission, can you really criticize government? Friedman saw this clearly in every socialist country. The pattern was identical. Economic control led to political control, led to totalitarianism. Not sometimes. Always. Because people who control your economic survival control your vote, your speech, your very existence. This is why he fought so hard for free markets. Not because he loved capitalism or hated government or worshiped money. Because he understood that economic freedom is a foundation of all other freedoms. Let me make this concrete for you with something Americans are experiencing right now. The growing push for government to control speech online, restrict misinformation, determine what's acceptable opinion. Friedman would ask, who do you trust with that power? Because here's the thing, if government can shut down your business for not complying with speech codes, if banks can freeze your account for donating to the wrong cause, if you can lose your job for expressing unapproved views, do you have freedom of speech? Technically, yes. Practically, no. The First Amendment says government can't arrest you for speech. But if government partners with corporations to economically destroy you for speech, the result is the same. You're silenced. Friedman understood this vulnerability. That's why he insisted on separating economic and political power. If government can't control your livelihood, it can't control your voice. But merge those powers, let government control both economy and politics, and you get China, you get Soviet Union, you get every authoritarian regime in history. This is your sixth tool, and it's the most important one. Always ask, do I want government having this power? Not the current administration. Government, forever. Because power never shrinks, it only grows. Watch how this clarifies current debates. Someone proposes government should run healthcare. Friedman asks, do you want government deciding what medical treatments you can receive? Do you want bureaucrats determining whether you're worth treating? Because that's what single-payer systems do. They ration care by committee decision. Someone proposes government should control social media. Friedman asks, do you want the same people who run the DMV deciding what you're allowed to say online? Do you trust them to fairly determine truth? Someone proposes government should direct corporate decisions. Friedman asks, do you want politicians who take corporate donations, controlling which businesses succeed and fail? Might they help their donors and punish critics? See how this protection works? By keeping government out of economic decisions, you limit its power over your entire life. That's not about being anti-government. That's about being pro-freedom. Friedman believed in government. He thought it had crucial roles: protecting property rights, enforcing contracts, defending against foreign threats, preventing force and fraud. Those are real functions requiring government power. But he also understood that power corrupts. So you give government only the power it absolutely needs, and you fragment that power across competing institutions. You don't concentrate economic and political power in the same hands. This is why Friedman fought minimum wage laws, not because he opposed high wages. He wanted workers to earn more. But he opposed government setting wages because he understood it's the camel's nose under the tent. Today, government sets minimum wage. Tomorrow, it sets maximum wage. Next week, it assigns you to jobs. 10 years later, you're in a command economy with no freedom. That's not slippery slope fallacy. That's history. It happened in every country that concentrated economic power in government hands. You're living in a moment when Americans are casually proposing massive government control over economy. Friedman's framework helps you see why that's terrifying, not for your bank account, but for your freedom. All right, let's bring this home. You've learned Friedman's methodology. Now let's practice applying it to policies you're hearing about right now, so you internalize this framework. First application: student loan forgiveness. The proposal: government forgives $10,000 to $50,000 in student debt. The argument: helps struggling graduates, stimulates economy, reduces inequality. How would Friedman analyze this? Question 1. Compared to what? Compared to people who didn't go to college, or who worked through school, or who chose cheaper schools, or who paid off their loans. Why do they now pay for others' choices? What about future students? Do they get free college too, or just this generation? Question 2, what are the incentives? If government forgives loans, what does that tell future borrowers? Borrow whatever you want. Eventually, it'll be forgiven. What does it tell universities? Raise tuition. Students will borrow more because they expect forgiveness. The policy incentivizes exactly the behavior that created the crisis. Question 3, who actually benefits? Primarily upper-middle-class college graduates who earn more than average Americans anyway. Poor people who never went to college get nothing. They just pay the bill through taxes and inflation. Evidence test. Has widespread loan forgiveness been tried? Yes, multiple countries. Result? Tuition increases, moral hazard grows. Taxpayers fund it, problems worsen. Freedom framework. Does government have authority to transfer private debt to public? Who voted for this? What about next crisis? Credit cards, mortgages? Where does it end? Friedman's verdict. This policy fails every test. Worsens a problem it claims to solve, benefits the well-off, punishes the responsible, and expands government power arbitrarily. See how that works? You just independently arrived at rigorous economic analysis using Friedman's framework. No economics degree required. Second application. Price controls on gas or groceries. The proposal. Cap prices on essential goods to fight inflation. The argument. Protect struggling families from corporate greed. Your turn. Apply Friedman's questions. Compared to what? Compared to letting prices reflect supply and demand, which signals scarcity and incentivizes production. What are the incentives? If you cap prices below market rate, producers reduce supply. Why sell at a loss? Consumers increase demand. Prices are artificially low. You create shortages. Then you need rationing. Then you need enforcement. Then you need black markets. Who actually benefits? People who get to buy at controlled prices before shortages hit. Who loses? Everyone else who faces empty shelves. Plus, you don't solve inflation. You just hide it through shortages instead of prices. Evidence test. Price controls have been tried throughout history. Result? Always shortages. Soviet Union, Venezuela. Even Nixon's 1970s controls. Always fails. Freedom framework. Government now decides what's a fair price. Who determines that? What else can they price control? Where's the limiting principle? Friedman's verdict. Price controls don't fight inflation. They create shortages while inflation continues. Bad policy solving wrong problem. You're getting this. You're thinking like Friedman now. Third application. Universal basic income. I'll let you do this one yourself. Apply each question. Compared to what alternative approaches to poverty? What does it incentivize regarding work? Family formation, skill development. Who benefits, truly poor, or everyone including middle class? What's the evidence from experiments tried so far? What power does government gain by making everyone dependent on monthly checks? Work through it. I bet you can predict Friedman's concerns just by applying his framework systematically. And that's the point. Once you learn to think this way, you become analytically independent. You don't need Friedman to tell you what to think about new policies. You have the tools to figure out yourself. This is what education should be. Not telling you answers, but teaching you how to find answers. Friedman understood that. His entire career was saying, don't trust me. Look at the evidence yourself. Ask the hard questions. Demand actual results, not good intentions. You're equipped now. You have the framework. You have the questions. You have the evidence standards. You have the freedom principle connecting it all. Every economic debate you encounter from now on, you'll see it differently, clearer, deeper, more honestly. That's not becoming an economist. That's becoming a free-thinking citizen who refuses to be manipulated. Remember where we started? That feeling of economic confusion, being told one thing while experiencing another, wondering if you're crazy for noticing the contradictions? That confusion is an accident. It's not your fault. It's not evidence of your ignorance. It's what happens when people with power obscure cause and effect to avoid accountability. Friedman spent his life ripping away that obscurity, not to prove he was smarter than everyone, not to win academic arguments, to show ordinary citizens like you that economics isn't mysterious, and you don't need authorities interpreting reality for you. You can see clearly. You now understand that when someone proposes a policy, you immediately ask, compare to what? What are the incentives? Who actually benefits? What happened when this was tried before? What does this do to freedom? Those questions cut through 90% of economic manipulation you'll encounter, because most bad policies can't survive honest answers to those questions. That's why politicians avoid them. That's why they argue from intention instead of results. That's why they sell emotional narratives instead of showing evidence. Because evidence destroys bad policy arguments. But you're not dependent on their narratives anymore. You have Friedman's framework. You can analyze policies yourself. You can predict consequences before they happen. You can protect your family by anticipating what government actions will do to your purchasing power, your freedom, your future. This isn't just intellectual. This is practical protection. When they tell you inflation is corporate greed, you ask, what happened to money supply? When they propose rent control, you ask, what happened to housing availability in cities that tried this? When they promise government will solve health care, you ask, compare to what alternatives and what's the evidence? You're not being difficult. You're being empirical. You're being Friedman. And here's what will happen. You'll start seeing patterns everywhere. You'll watch news and immediately identify the incentive structures. You'll read policy proposals and predict consequences before analysts do. You'll notice when officials change narratives because previous claims prove false. You'll become very hard to fool. That's the transformation. Not from ignorant to educated, from confused to clear, from vulnerable to empowered, from passive consumer of narratives to active thinker demanding evidence. Friedman didn't want followers. He wanted independent thinkers who insisted on reality over rhetoric. That's what you are now. Starting today, when you encounter any economic claim, news article, political speech, social media post, friend's opinion, apply Friedman's framework systematically. Pause before reacting. Ask the questions. Compare to what? What are the incentives? Who benefits? What's the evidence? What happens to freedom? Most importantly, don't just consume the analysis. Do it yourself. Look up the data. Find the natural experiments. Check whether predictions came true. This isn't about trusting Friedman instead of others. It's about trusting evidence instead of narratives. In conversations, you don't need to quote Friedman or sound like an economist. Just ask genuine questions. That sounds good, but has it been tried? What happened? Or I hear you, but what would that incentivize people to do? Or help me understand, who would actually benefit from this? Those questions, asked honestly, are devastating to bad arguments. And they're not combative. They're curious. They invite evidence. For your own financial protection, watch what policies government actually implements, not what they promise. When they massively expand money supply, move assets accordingly. When they propose price controls, prepare for shortages. When they increase regulations in an industry, expect costs to rise. Friedman's framework doesn't just help you understand, it helps you anticipate and prepare. And when you vote, when you advocate, when you speak up, you'll do so from knowledge rather than emotion. You'll support policies that actually work rather than policies that sound good. You'll resist expansions of government power not because you're against government, but because you understand the freedom implications. You're thinking longer term. You're seeing consequences, not just intentions. You're thinking like Friedman, not to become him, to become the clearest thinking version of yourself. There's a phrase from Friedman I can't forget. One of the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. Do you feel the weight of that truth? Do you recognize how it changes everything? Because most political debate is about intentions. Who cares more? Who's more compassionate? Who wants to help? And as long as debate stays there, bad policies continue indefinitely because intentions are unchallengeable. But Friedman shifted the ground. He said, "I don't care what you intended. Show me what happened." That's not cynicism. That's love for the people policies actually affect. It's caring more about real outcomes for real families than about feeling good about your own compassion. Imagine your life 6 months from now after applying this framework consistently. You won't be perfect. Friedman never promised perfection. But you'll be clear. You'll watch economic news without confusion. You'll evaluate policies without manipulation. You'll protect your family with foresight rather than reacting to each crisis. You'll see cause and effect where others see only chaos. And maybe, just maybe, you'll speak up. You'll ask those questions in conversations. You'll demand evidence in debates. You'll refuse to let intention substitute for results. Not everyone will like it. Friedman was called heartless for asking hard questions. But you'll know the truth. Demanding that policies actually work is compassion. Accepting failure because intentions were good is cruelty. This channel exists to discover together the wisdom of thinkers like Friedman. People who insisted that reality matters more than rhetoric, that evidence trumps intentions, that freedom requires eternal vigilance. Subscribe if you want to continue this journey toward clarity. In the next video, we'll explore how Friedman predicted today's economic crisis decades ago and what he'd tell you to do about it. See you there. And meanwhile, may evidence guide your thinking and freedom guide your choices.